Hello traders, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So we're going to be looking at the weekly Forex forecast for the coming week. If you're new to the channel and wish to be staying updated with our weekly Forex forecast, you can do well to subscribe to the YouTube channel and also join the free Telegram community where you can have access to chart analysis. If you're interested in the daily market Forex forecast breakdown video, then you can do well to join the gold membership to have access to the daily market forecast breakdown. Let's head to the chart to look at the forecast for the coming week. So guys, this is DXY and this is the weekly time frame. If you guys can remember, vividly last week I told us to expect more bullish move of price to the upside. We're looking forward to see price will rate out this buy side liquidity and mitigate this weekly inversion fair value gap and fair value gap. Because you can see this is where we have the last bullish move before the bearish move to the downside that took out all this sell side liquidity. Now what we can see is the market actually dipped lower, but not into the mean threshold of this weekly inversion fair value gap before we had the bullish push of price to the upside. We can see that price returned to the high of the weekly inversion fair value gap. And then you can see the bullish move of price to the upside. So I'm still expecting more bullish move because we're expecting to see that price would rate out this buy side liquidity and mitigate this weekly inversion fair value gap and a fair value gap also here in the weekly time frame. But before that happens, we possibly want to see price gives us a bearish move to the downside before that bullish move to the upside. But this is a weekly time frame, so let's actually drop to a follower time frame. So let's go to the daily time frame. We'll go to the 4-hour time frame, and possibly we'll check the 1-hour time frame. So actually look out for zones. We may expect to see the fall of price to, and then the continuation to the upside, or we may see price just for the push to the upside. Let's actually go to the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what you guys can see is that we can see that price is reacting at this bearish order block, and we can see how price faced rejection when price mitigated this candle week. We can see the rejection to the downside. So, last week we expected to see that price would actually dip lower to mitigate the mean threshold before the bullish move. What we can see is price dip into the high of the weekly inversion fair value gap, and then we can now see the bullish continuation to the upside. We can see this is our draw on liquidity. Price took out this buy side liquidity, sponsored this bearish move to the downside that took out all these sell side liquidities. So now, what we are to expect to see next week is to see that price would dip or may actually dip lower into the weekly inversion fair value gap and consider this as a sell side liquidity before we have the push of price to the upside. Or we could see price may just push further into the weekly inversion fair value gap and the fair value gap. But I'm expecting to see a push of price to the downside. We can see we have a fair value gap here. So price may dip to fill up this fair value gap and then continue to the upside, or price may dip lower to take out this sell side liquidity before pushing to the upside. So let's check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see within the daily order block zone we identified, you can see we actually saw this 4-hour fair value gap. Our price returned to the fair value gap. So we expected to see that price would dip lower to the mean threshold or rate out this sell side liquidity and mitigate the weekly breakup before we have the continuation to the upside. But what we can see, we had the little pullback of price to the downside, and then price mitigated the high of the weekly inversion fair value gap and then the continuation. So we can see that price actually closed above the 4-hour fair value gap. Now we're expecting to see that the 4-hour fair value gap will support price, then push price to the upside to rate out the buy side liquidity. So now what we are to see or expect is either we see that the market is actually going to return to the 4-hour fair value gap, which is now an inversion fair value gap, and then we have the continuation of price to the upside. Or we may see the market is actually going to dip more lower to take out this sell side liquidity into the weekly inversion fair value gap, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So this is the expectation I'm actually having in the DXY. So let's actually check the 1-hour time frame. So here in the 1-hour time frame, basically it's the same thing we actually identify in the 4-hour time frame. So you can see this is the 4-hour inversion fair value gap zone. So we are expecting to see the return of price to the downside, and then we see how price projects to the upside, or price may take out the sell side liquidity. And what we can actually now see also is we can see we have this sell side liquidity. So price may dip lower, and we have this consolidation within the 4-hour fair value gap, which is now an inversion fair value gap. So price may not take out the sell side liquidity. So price may drop to react at the 4-hour inversion fair value gap, and then we have the push of price to the upside. So these are the two zones we are actually to look out for before we can actually frame the bullish move. Look at price action within the 4-hour inversion fair value gap, or expect to see price drop lower to take out last week low points before we have the continuation to the upside. So this is what I have to show us guys in the DXY. So let's check out the EURUSD pair. So guys, this is the EURUSD pair and this is the weekly time frame. So last week we identified the monthly implied fair value gap. And in the weekly time frame, we can see this institutional order flow. So we expected to see the push of price into the monthly implied fair value gap because we can see we have this institutional order flow, we have this order block. The expectation is to see further drop of price, and we can see price further drop to the downside, but price did not mitigate the mean threshold. So for the coming week, we may see that price may sweep this candle low point to mitigate the mean threshold, and then we have bullish move of price to the upside. But then let's actually drop to the lower time frame. Let's check out the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, last week we actually identified this relatively equal lows because this was actually last upper week bearish candlestick. So now what we can see is that price dropped to the downside and then took out the relatively equal lows. But then we can see this sell side liquidity is not yet rated, and slightly below this sell side liquidity, you can see we have this fair value gap and we have the order block. So we may see the possibility of price dipping lower, take out this sell side liquidity before we have the bullish push of price to the upside. So I'm looking forward to see that price may actually return to take out this high point, and then we have the fall of price before we can frame a bullish move of price to the upside, because our expectation is to see price takes out this buy side liquidity. So this is actually what I'm expecting to see in the markets, except the market decides to actually return and respect this fair value gap here. Price return and then falls to the downside to take out the sell side liquidity, and then we have the bullish push of price to the upside. So let's actually check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can clearly see is we have the sell side liquidity, and we can't really frame any valid sponsorship candle here. Aside this rejection block, we can actually identify here. So what we can see is that now price drop lower, and if you actually check the trade setup for last week, we expected to see that price will push to the upside before falling to the downside, because this was where we actually had the Friday candlestick. So we expected this push to possibly fill up the fair value gap before we have the fall. Now we can see that now price returned into the fair value gap, but did not fill up the fair value gap, and then price fell. So what we can possibly expect is to see that price may push to the upside and then take out this high point, and then we have the fall. So we could see that price may return to the fair value gap to fill it up. Price will return to take out the sell side liquidity, and then we bring the bullish move of price to the upside. So this is my expectation in the EURUSD. If price doesn't return to this fair value gap, then we could just see price may actually dip lower to take out the sell side liquidity to fill up this fair value gap, and then we have the bullish move to frame from this fair value gap zone, which is in confluence with the monthly implied fair value gap. So this is all I have to show us guys in the EURUSD. So let's check out the GBPUSD here. So this is GBPUSD, and this is the weekly time frame. So last week we identified that the EURUSD took out its own sell side liquidity, and then we expected to see that the GBPUSD would actually dip lower into the implied fair value gap we identified in the monthly time frame in confluence with the monthly inversion fair value gap. We expected to see the price would dip lower to take out the sell side liquidity, mitigate the zone before we begin to frame the bullish move, because we're expecting to see price will fill up this fair value gap above this buy side liquidity. So now what we can see is that GBPUSD was a little bit messy. Should I even say a little bit? GBPUSD was messy last week. So what we can see is that now price fell to the downside, but then price have not yet taken out this sell side liquidity, and price have not returned into our expected sponsorship zone. So I'm expecting to see for the fall of price to take out this sell side liquidity before we can actually frame any form of a bullish move of price to the upside. So let's actually check the daily time frame. So here's the daily time frame in the GBPUSD. So you can see how GBPUSD moved last week. The price action is actually really a bad one. So we are still expecting to see that price will take out the sell side liquidity. So I'm still expecting more downward price movement to the downside for price to take out this sell side liquidity, and then we begin to frame the bullish move. So I can really identify a valid zone here in the daily time frame to expect the possibility of a pullback and then the fall. So let's actually then go to the 4-hour time frame. So last week, we actually expected to see that GBPUSD may actually return to the upside to mitigate this institutional order flow and fill up this fair value gap before actually falling. But we can see the price action, a very messy one. It's not really a very clean price action. So now we could possibly see that price may return to this rejection block zone, and then we have price fall to take out this sell side liquidity before we can have the bullish push of price to the upside. I can't really give us a valid zone in the GBPUSD. It looks somehow, it's not really clear. So, but I'm looking forward to see if price is actually going to push to the upside into this rejection zone, or price may take out this buy side liquidity before we have fall to the downside, take out the sell side liquidity, and then we frame the bullish move of price to the upside. So this is just what I have to show us, guys, in the GBPUSD. The GBPUSD, it's not really giving us a clean, clear zones, but all we know is we're expecting to see that it further falls into this higher time frame zones we identify, and then we frame the bullish move to the upside. So let's check out the gold pair. So guys, this is gold and this is the weekly time frame. Last week, actually, gold delivered just as we expected to see the drop of price into our weekly fair value gap. The price did not mitigate the mean threshold, and then we can see the rejection to the upside. We're expecting to see price would actually take out this buy side liquidity. So last week, we expected to see the sweep of the sell side liquidity, and then we actually have a bullish move to the upside. So we can see our price return into our weekly fair value gap, and we can see the rejection to the upside. So for the coming week, we're still expecting the possibility of seeing price takes out the buy side liquidity. But then we have this rejection week, so we could see price drop to actually mitigate the main threshold, and then before we can frame any form of a bullish move to the upside. So let's check out the daily time frame. So now what we can see here in the daily time frame is that we can identify our weekly fair value gap, how price return took out the sell side. So we have sell side liquidity run, and now we can see price giving us this momentum to the upside, bullish momentum to the upside. We're seeing and expecting to see that price will read the buy side liquidity. So what I'm expecting to see in the gold pair is that price will return, pull back into the daily inversion fair value gap, and then we have the continuation of price to the upside. So this is actually my expectation, to see the pullback of price into this daily inversion fair value gap, and then we have the push of price to the upside. So let's check the 4-hour time frame and see. So in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see is last week I actually told us about this liquidity pools. We expected to see price return to take out in confluence with the sell side liquidity, and now we can see our price return, and then we have price within our weekly fair value gap. Now we can see the push of price to the upside. So we identify the daily inversion fair value gap, so we can see pools of liquidity here. I'm expecting to see price will fall to the downside into the daily inversion fair value gap, and then we have the bullish continuation, except price chooses to do otherwise and then falls into the mean threshold of the weekly fair value gap and then pushes to the upside. But this is actually my expectation in gold. So when the market opens, we'll be looking at price delivery, then we can frame our entries. So guys, let's check out the USDJPY pair. So guys, before we look at the USDJPY pair, if you're actually interested in the daily forex market breakdown videos and trade setups, then you can actually subscribe to the gold membership. And if you're interested in our mentorship program, then you can actually subscribe to the diamond membership. Link to the gold and diamond membership is actually in the description section to this video. So guys, let's look at the USDJPY pair. So what we can see in the USDJPY pair, last week we identified how price pushed to the upside and then raided this breakout block, because we can see this sponsored the move to the downside that took out the sell side liquidity. We have the bullish candle that sponsored the bearish movement that took out the sell side liquidity. So we expected to see the dip of price to the breakout block, and then we have the continuation into the weekly fair value gap, because we were expecting to see that price would take out this buy side liquidity, and we can see price take out this buy side liquidity. Now we can see that the fall of price did not really return fully to mitigate the breakout block. Price reacted at this rejection block, and then we have the push of price to the upside. But then we can see that price did not push sufficiently to actually close above this buy side liquidity. So I'm still expecting more bullish push of price into this weekly fair value gap in the USDJPY pair. So let's actually check the daily time frame. So what we can see in the daily time frame is we identify this institutional order flow zone, and then we can see this is the weekly fair value gap. So we identify how price actually broke this order block last week, and then we expected to see that price would return to mitigate the mean threshold in confluence with the breakout block zone we identify in the weekly time frame, and then we frame the bullish move to the upside. What we can see is that price actually dipped lower, but then price mitigated the high of this order block, and then we can see the push of price to the upside. So for the coming week, my expectation is still bullish, but then we could see price drop to the downside to take out this sell side liquidity, and then we have the continuation to the upside. But then let's actually check the 4-hour time frame. So here in the 4-hour time frame, we can identify this sell side liquidity to the downside. You know, last week this was Friday's candle, so we expected to see price will fall to the downside into this particular zone, and then we can frame the bullish move. But then we can see price fell, but not really into the main threshold, and then price gave us a rejection, because we expected to see price reaction at the main threshold in confluence to the weekly breakout block. And then we can see price return and then price went bullish. Now we can see price mitigated the low of the weekly fair value gap, took out this buy side liquidity, reacting at this order block. So now we could possibly see that price would dip lower to take out this sell side liquidity. So what I'm expecting to see is the possibility of price dipping lower to take out this sell side liquidity. And then we have the continuation to the upside. So this is actually what I'm looking forward to see in the USDJPY pair. So guys, let's check out the USDCHF pair also. So guys, this is USDCHF. So, last week we expected to see for the bullish move to the upside because we're expecting to see price comes into this weekly rejection log zone. And what we can see is we expected to see a pullback into this bullish candle week before we have the continuation to the upside. And we can see how price dip lower into that bullish candle week. And then we can see how price gave us the movement to the upside, but then price closed below the mean threshold of this weekly value gap. So for the coming week, I'm still expecting for the bullish move because I'm expecting to see price returns into this weekly rejection block. And the DXY also is actually on a short-term bullish move. So we should expect to see price pulls back and then price for the push to the upside. So let's actually check the daily time frame. So here in the daily time frame, what we can see is that price is reacting at this fair value gap. And we can see this is our weekly rejection block. And then we have this other block. And you can see above we have fair value gap also. Now we can see price is reacting at the weekly fair value gap. We have this bearish candle to the downside. Below the mean threshold, price return retested the mean threshold. So we could see the possibility of price falling further to the downside to take out this sell side liquidity. Possibility of price taking out this sell side liquidity. And then we have for the push of price. Since we see price close below the main threshold. So we could see more bearish move and then we frame a bullish move to the upside. So guys, let's actually look at the 4-hour time frame. So guys, this is the 4-hour time frame. So you can see that last week we expected to see this fall of price to the downside into this main threshold, and then we see price push to the upside. Now we can see how price pushed to the upside, but then now price fell, and now price returned to retest the main threshold. Price is still below the weekly fair value gap main threshold. So we could see the possibility of price for the pushing to the downside to take out this sell side liquidity, mitigate the main threshold since we have this fair value gap, and then we have price continuation to the upside. So you can see above the weekly rejection block we identify, you can see we have this 4-hour inversion fair value gap. I'm expecting to see price for the push to the downside, take out the sell side liquidity, and then we can have the bullish continuation to the upside. So guys, this is what I have to show us guys for the coming week. So until we actually see you guys again next week. So cheers and have a profitable trading week.